This video is brought to you by my based patrons, and I'm especially thankful for them today because YouTube keeps claiming this video. Stick around to the end to learn more. It's that time of year again, the time when all the horror movies start coming out from every dark corner and crevice to pop up on your recommended list in every streaming service. Halloween is right around the corner.
I'm David Pumpkins!
And in another week or so, your annoying neighbor will already be putting up their Christmas decorations. That's me. I'm that neighbor. You can thank my mother for that. Anyway, I've never done a Halloween-themed video, so I thought I'd rectify that this year by talking about my new favorite horror movie, Hereditary. Yes, I know it's old, just like me. A quick heads up though, this video is going to contain massive and myriad spoilers for Hereditary. We are going to do a scorched earth, no stone unturned deep dive into this incredible piece of art, and I am making it specifically for people who have already seen the movie. So if you haven't, please do yourself a favor and go watch it first. But since it's Halloween and maybe you're here looking for a recommendation, here are some of my other favorite spooky flicks. Hereditary. No really, go watch it. Also, Midsommar. Written and directed by the same guy that did Hereditary. Sensing a pattern yet? Midsommar is a wickedly unsettling film about a grieving sister going to a commune in Sweden with her boyfriend and his friends for a pagan festival, when things start to go wrong. I think director Ari Aster really likes delving into the process of grieving a loved one and the strange things that grief can make us do. Also, no need to go down on someone when you get your daily serving of pubes and your chicken pot pies. You'll get it when you get it. Ready or Not. This is more of a campy thriller with some horror elements based around a deadly game of hide and seek. But if you've ever been fed up with horror protagonists acting supremely fucking stupid, then this movie is for you. Plus, it has one of, if not the, best endings of any film I've ever seen in the genre. The Witch. Awesome movie about a 17th century frontier American family dealing with, well, witchcraft. Don't want to give too much away, but damn, this is a good movie. Really set the stage for fantastic A24 style horror, and was the film that catapulted Anya Taylor-Joy's career into stardom. You know what? Just any A24 horror thriller movie. They're basically all sure bets. On the flip side, I'd recommend basically nothing by Ryan Murphy. They'll just intrigue you for the first half and let you down by the end. Cinematic blue balls, basically. If you want horror series, check out The Haunting of Hill House, based on the acclaimed Shirley Jackson story, or Midnight Mass, both directed by the same guy, Mike Flanagan. The former has an episode filmed with these two amazing single takes, one present day and one flashback, where the camera spins the entire episode spinning around slowly, both forcing you to stay in the moment with these characters while simultaneously evoking this great sense of disorientation that they're feeling. Really awesome stuff. Alright, that's enough of that. Let's talk about the movie that you actually clicked on this video for. Hereditary is probably the single greatest anti-pot PSA ever put to film, and yes, I stole that joke from Reddit. It blows all those truth commercials out of the water.
Hey, Lindsay, I wish you didn't smoke weed.
And I don't even think the director is against using pot. What the fuck am I talking about? The movie is also the theatrical debut of writer-director Ari Aster. And I want you to remember that as we go through the rest of this video, because it's the guy's first fucking film. Incredible. Hereditary tells the story of a family moving on from the loss of a loved one, trying to process that grief while in the uncomfortable situation of not really liking said loved one. As the film progresses, everything goes sideways. First, the son, Peter, is in a horrific car accident which kills his little sister. Then, trying to cope with that loss, the family, particularly Peter and his mother Annie, begin to experience supernatural phenomena. Slowly, it is revealed that they are being manipulated by a cult worshipping a demon named Paimon, trying to implant it into Peter, a la Rosemary's Baby. It is equal parts horror and psychological thriller, but I think a more accurate genre would just be supremely fucking upsetting. The movie is a feast for the eyes, the ears, and the mind. There is not a single wasted frame or line of dialogue. The amount of details and Easter eggs hidden throughout is like a new rock star's wet dream. But better yet, every major piece of the movie is layered in meaning. There are both in-universe, literal explanations, as well as thematic, symbolic meanings behind everything. I am absolutely in love with this film. I've watched it 3 times now, and just in preparation for this video, and pored over think pieces and Reddit threads alike, trying to catch every detail. And I still feel like I'm discovering new things. It is an absolute masterpiece and a great subject for anyone interested in dissecting film. I banged out this entire 12-page script in a single day because there's so much to talk about. The very first shot of Hereditary depicts a treehouse and really gives us an early look at the style of Ari Aster. The shot is framed through, well, a literal window frame. Ari does this a lot in the film. Framing is just the choice of what the director and cinematographer choose to show the viewer. In other words, what's visible in the shot, from what perspective it's shown, what angle the camera's at relative to the scene, etc. Literally anything in the frame that you can see, and that which is hidden, is almost always a deliberate choice by filmmakers. But that is especially true in Hereditary. There are many shots in this film framed through literal frames, window frames, door frames, hallways, etc. Establishing shots in particular often depict the family house from far away with what I believe is a tilt shift effect layered on top. All of this together gives the sense that these people we are watching are almost toys, miniatures being moved around like pawns on a chessboard. This theme will come up again and again throughout the movie. The first shot of the treehouse is also an example of another style used by the director. It clues us into the idea that the treehouse will become important in some way later. Ari Aster does this a lot throughout his work, silently hanging the camera's focus on an object or a place that will later become critical, usually involved in the death of a character. Many shots utilize a slow zoom or lateral pan, which gives the viewer the sense that the camera is in the eyes of the character as they slowly shift their gaze around a room. All of this information is contained in that first shot. We then move away from the treehouse and into Annie's workshop. She is an artist that creates miniatures like dollhouses. This is one of those things that I mentioned that has layers of meaning. Within the fiction of the film, these miniatures serve as a way for Annie to cope with her trauma. Throughout her life, both before and during the film, Annie dealt with absolute chaos. From a battery of mental illness in her close family to the horrific deaths of those same people, she clearly feels that life is totally outside her control. But these miniatures are an outlet for her. We see her throughout the film recreate some of those events from her life, poring over every excruciating detail, controlling everything in defiance of every other aspect of her life. Yet the miniatures are also a different metaphor for control. Going back to that first scene, we zoom in on one of those dioramas, a small-scale recreation of the family's house, painstakingly detailed. Slowly, the camera moves in on a single room, Peter's room. And as it fills the frame, it slowly morphs into Peter's actual room, where he lies in bed. From the audience's perspective, it's kind of like the director is shouting at us, saying, "These people are toys, their actions are being controlled, they have no real choices, and their fates are predetermined." Actually, this is literally told to us later in a scene with Peter. While in class, the teacher is discussing the story of Hercules. I'm not pronouncing it Heracles, fuck you.
But let's all remember, Sophocles wrote the oracle so that it was unconditional, meaning Heracles never had any choice, right? So does that make it more tragic or less tragic than if he has a choice?
All right, so now we are finally past the first couple of shots. The dad, Steve, wakes the children to prepare for their grandmother's funeral. Strangely, though, none of the family seem all that broken up about Annie's mother's death. Speaking at the ceremony, Annie describes her mother as a very private person and just not super nice.
My mother was a very secretive and private woman. She had private rituals, private friends.
Pay attention to the faces in the wake afterwards, because some of them will be seen again. Later on, Annie goes to a group therapy meeting for grieving loved ones. There, she describes herself as being resistant to these sorts of things, but that they helped her once before. This scene serves as an exposition dump which gives the viewer the history of the family.
My mom died a week ago, and she didn't have an easy life. She had DID, and my father died when I was a baby because he had psychotic depression. My older brother had schizophrenia, and when he was 16, he hanged himself in my mother's bedroom, accusing her of putting people inside him.
But film students, pay attention here, says the guy that studied physics, not film. Exposition can really weigh down the pacing of a film and take the viewer out of the experience if done wrong. But here, the writer very smartly placed it in a scene where Annie is openly expressing her feelings to a group of people, letting out her grief while simultaneously informing us, the viewer, of a lot of important background details. That is really clever writing. This history is one explanation of the title also, Hereditary. Often, mental illnesses like depression and schizophrenia are passed down genetically, generation to generation, and from the outside observer, such as Annie in the beginning of the film and later Steve, much of the events are viewed as a result of mental illness. However, we, the viewer, soon become aware that the true generational baton is of a supernatural nature, possession by the demon Paimon. Likely what was seen as multiple personalities in Annie's mother was actually the switching between her true personality and the demon possessing her. The brother also claimed people were being put inside him, which in retrospect was obviously an attempted possession. And this continues throughout the film through different family members down the generational line. Another possible interpretation is the seemingly hereditary trait of the family keeping secrets from one another. Annie tells Steve that she's going to see movies when she is really attending these grief counseling sessions. Steve tells her that the cemetery is calling about billing issues when they are really notifying him that the grandmother's grave was dug up. Soon, Peter follows in their footsteps.
Because nobody admits anything they've done!
But before that, we see Charlie, the daughter, in school. It is never explicitly stated, but Charlie is coded as developmentally challenged in some way. She is a very quiet child, barely communicating more than a few words at a time. We first see her sleeping in the treehouse with barely any blankets and no heater in the cold climate of mountainous Utah, yet she didn't seem bothered by it at all.
That's how you get pneumonia.
That's okay.
Later at school, we see her take a pair of scissors and cut off the head from an already dead pigeon. She uses it to create one of her unsettling figurines. Again, it's never explicitly stated, but the girl we see isn't actually Charlie. At least that's how I interpret it. The real Charlie may never have been neurodivergent at all. Through some of the details that Annie shares in her group, we learn that Charlie has likely always been possessed by the demon Paimon. Annie even states that Charlie had a very close relationship with her grandma.
Which is why I gave her my daughter, who she immediately stabbed her hooks into.
And one of those miniatures shows the grandma breastfeeding her. Also of note, Charlie has a tic, often clicking her tongue to the roof of her mouth. Yet later in the film, this is revealed to be a sound that Paimon himself makes, regardless of his host. And now that we've met the whole family, we get to the inciting incident of the film, and oh Lord, this is an absolute clinic on effective, upsetting filmmaking. Let me set the scene. First, some background. Back in the classroom scene, Peter's teacher discusses Hercules being undone by his fatal flaw, arrogance. At the same time, though, the camera, which is Peter's eyes at this point, seems to be staring at the ass of the female student in front of him. Keep that in the back of your pocket. Also, earlier on in the film, it was set up that Charlie has a nut allergy.
There aren't nuts in that, are there?
No.
So back in the present, Peter wants to go to a party, but Annie forces Charlie to tag along with him. On the way there, the camera follows the car as it drives along the road, but then suddenly snaps into focus onto a telephone pole that they pass and sits there for a few seconds. There's a strange symbol on the pole as well. As soon as they get to the party, Peter makes a beeline towards the girl from his class and asks her to go do 1 or 2 weeds in the other room. He tells Charlie to occupy herself with some of the chocolate cake, which is a totally normal thing that high schoolers bake at a party. Unfortunately for Peter, he didn't see that they also put an assload of crushed pecans on the cake. Cut to Charlie a few minutes later, interrupting the smoke session, complaining that her throat is swelling up.
It's hard to breathe.
What do you mean?
What do you mean?
Peter freaks out. He picks her up and speeds away in the car, trying to get to a hospital before his little sister asphyxiates. Apparently, in this world, EpiPens are far too expensive even for millionaire homeowners to give their child to carry around as a preventative measure. In the car, things aren't going great. Charlie is clearly suffering pretty horrifically. She opens up the window and sticks her head out, presumably trying to force fresh air into her mouth hole. But just then, Peter has to swerve to avoid what looks like a dead dog in the road. And when he does, well, remember the telephone pole? So that is the inciting incident of the plot. Charlie's suffocation and decapitation are absolutely horrific, even if we don't really see the latter happen clearly. But, and not to take away from the tragedy of Charlie's death, the truly horrific part is what happens next. The camera hovers over the tires as Peter brings the car to a screeching halt. Then, a close-up on his face, the silent processing of what just happened. His eyes inch up towards the rearview mirror, but then dart away before he actually sees his sister's headless corpse. Very slowly, he forces his body to move, tears streaming down his face, letting his foot off the pedal, motivating himself to go forward. It's just so fucking good. The directing is fantastic, sure, but Alex Wolff's acting is just insane. The complex sequence of emotions he is able to display with no words spoken is just incredible. But that's only half of it though, because Peter is unable to truly process the weight of what just happened in the car. He goes into autopilot mode, slowly walking to his room and laying in bed. The camera follows him. And then we get another close-up on his blank, catatonic face as he lies there. The scene shifts from night to day. We hear his parents talking far away, Annie saying that she's going out to run errands. Yet the camera is still stuck on Peter. It hasn't moved at all. We don't see Annie discover her daughter's body, but we hear it. We feel her pain. And we see Peter's reaction to it at the same time. The camera is still stuck in place, just as he is. The scream and what follows immediately after literally made me feel sick.
I just want to die.
I don't know that I've ever been impacted that powerfully in that way by a film before. It reminds me of this video I saw online. I'm not showing it here for obvious reasons, but I can describe it. It was a dashcam view where a random stray brick flies off the back of a truck and through the windshield of a car, instantly killing the passenger. You don't actually see the death or the reaction in that video either, yet you hear the absolute despair in the driver's scream when it happens. Of all the death or gore videos I had seen up to that point, none affected me the way that one did, even though it only showed a broken windshield. I stopped watching those kinds of videos after that, so please trust me and don't go looking for it. It's awful. That's the exact feeling this movie gave me though. And while I'm horrified to write this, that is damn good filmmaking. The point of art such as film is to cause a reaction in its audience. High-octane action scenes evoke oohs and ahs, while romantic scenes are more
Still isn't over.
And horror specifically allows us to safely explore the darker parts of the human condition. But this, I don't know what sound is appropriate. I guess Annie's scream. The scene cuts to Charlie's head, left out on the road, covered in ants. I feel increasingly ill. But life must go on. The family buries Charlie's body, apparently still without its head. More on this later. And as Annie tries to cope with the loss of her daughter, she is approached by the cult that her mother was in, and is slowly lured in by her new friend, Joan. Joan, at first, is just a shoulder for Annie to cry on, relating to her by telling her about her own son and grandson that died, though things begin to quickly escalate. There is a conspicuous shot of the mail slot in the door, already full, when a card advertising a seance is sneakily slid on top. However, when Annie doesn't see this, the cult pushes things even more. Joan accidentally runs into her outside the craft store, talking about contacting her own dead grandson in a seance. She even takes Annie to her apartment to prove it to her. Annie is initially very skeptical of the seance, but after seeing and feeling the presence herself, she is convinced to try it to speak to Charlie. But before she leaves, Joan very pointedly tells her to make sure her entire family is in the house when she does. Annie tries the seance in the middle of the night, contacting Charlie first by herself. And then once she is successful, she brings in Steve and Peter with her.
What language is even that?
What the hell is even that?
But things don't go quite right. There is a decidedly ominous feel to this seance. Annie herself is seemingly possessed by Charlie. This is, I believe, the only time in the movie where we actually see Charlie's true personality come out. Notice the way she speaks through Annie is much different than the way she spoke before.
Mom?
I don't like this. Dad, I don't like this.
What's happening?
Please stop.
What's going on? Mom!
Please, you're really freaking me out. Please stop.
What's
Dad,
happening?
make it
Why is
stop,
everyone
please.
scared?
Sure, she could just be scared, but she is far more vocal than she ever was in the early scenes of the movie. Regardless, the entire thing scares the shit out of Peter and makes Steve fear for his wife's sanity. Recall the history of mental illness in Annie's family, and combined with her actions here, you can really see why he's concerned. We're going to skip ahead a bit from here. After the seance, the family begins to experience more and more supernatural events. Peter's face gets drawn in Charlie's old notebook, seemingly by itself, depicting his eyes being gouged out and his head cut off. He begins to experience signs of possession, being taken over by the demon. He sees the same blue light glint effect that Charlie saw early on in the film. Notice the position of his hand in this last clip. It's the same as the statue of Paimon at the end. The details in this movie are honestly nigh endless, and this video could be probably 3 hours long if I tried to point out every one, so we have to move on. Eventually, Annie figures out that she's been duped by Joan and the cult. She finds her mother's books on their satanic rituals, the symbols we have been seeing throughout the movie, and she finds her mother's decapitated body up in the attic, the second sacrifice for Paimon. In those books, we can see that Paimon is carrying a sack of 3 severed heads, which are the 3 sacrifices that must be made to fully complete the ritual. This theme of decapitation comes up again and again throughout the film, first with the dead pigeon that Charlie mutilates. Then at the party, some of the teens are watching a decapitation video. Then with Charlie herself, then with the grandmother, and finally, later on, with Annie. This is another one of those layered elements. Not only are the severed heads the sacrifices Paimon require, they also have a very important symbolic meaning. It goes back to the idea that the family is supposedly passing down mental illness, as one of the colloquial terms for insanity is losing your head or losing your mind. These women were possessed by a demon, losing control of their minds and later, literally their heads. Notice that Annie's brother, who supposedly had schizophrenia, was said to have hung himself, accusing Grandma of trying to put people inside him. He knew what was going on, he wanted out of it, and as a result, he was able to keep his head. Annie, trying to stop the events set in motion, tries to burn Charlie's journal, which she used in the seance. The journal, though, was connected to her because of the ritual, and so when she threw it in the fire, her arm also caught fire. Finally, she decides to open up to Steve about everything. He has understandably been concerned with her behavior, not only having to deal with the death of his daughter, but trying to not make his son feel like he was a murderer, trying to keep the family afloat and be the voice of reason through everything. He's honestly probably the most likable character in the movie. So, when she starts frantically babbling about cults and demons, showing them their daughter's notebook with pictures of Peter's eyes gouged out and trying to lead him in a seance, he thinks that she's finally lost herself and succumbed to the same sickness that the rest of her family had.
Oh, Steve, please understand, baby, please throw it in the fire.
This scene is so insanely good. Toni Collette and Gabriel Brin are excellent. You really feel for the both of them. At the same time, understanding that Annie is totally correct in her outlandish claims, but also how she sounds to somebody that doesn't know the things that she does. Annie tries to get Steve to burn the book for her. She knows that she will be burnt with it and is just too scared to throw it in the fire herself. She wants someone there with her. But Steve, understandably, doesn't want to play along with what he thinks is her delusion. He refuses. And so Annie, in pure desperation, finally determined to save her son, says fuck it and yeets the sketchbook into the flames, setting Steve on fire instead.
Daddy, chill.
There are multiple details and layers to the scene that I think we just need to take a step back and go through them one by one. First, Steve has constantly been worried about his family being cold throughout the movie, finding Charlie up in the treehouse in the beginning, having slept there overnight with barely any blanket.
That's how you get pneumonia.
Then later, Annie goes to sleep up there as well to feel close to her daughter.
If it gets too cold, come back in.
Then, during the seance, the windows were left open.
It's freezing in here.
This poor guy, who's just been constantly worried that his family is going to freeze to death, dies by immolation, engulfed in flames. But also, why did he catch fire instead of Annie? Well, if we recall, Joan said that the entire family needed to be present in the house for the seance. In doing so, it linked them all to Paimon and to the sketchbook. In one of Annie's mom's books, Paimon was called the god of mischief as well. So it let Annie think that she was the only one that was linked to the book, when in actuality, it was the whole family. Anyways, upon seeing her husband burn to death in their living room, Annie snaps and is taken over by Paimon. And from here, the movie jumps into sixth gear. Outside, the scene snaps from dusk to night. Peter is startled awake. He looks outside and sees a light on in the treehouse and calls for his mom. As he does so, Ari Aster's wonderful style of framing is accentuated here once again, as the camera and everything in frame are deathly still, except for Peter. And it takes us a moment for our eyes to really adjust. And then we see a possessed Annie perched up in the corner of the fucking ceiling. She had been there the entire time. As he gets up and looks around upstairs, we hear a crash from below, the piano.
Mom? Dad?
So he goes to investigate and finds the broken, tumbled piano, and then his father's extra crispy recipe lying on the ground. Then he turns around to find the creepy fuck from the funeral standing in a darkened doorway, naked and smiling. Somehow, Ari Aster made me more afraid of some random naked dude than I was for any season of American Horror Story. Finally, possessed Annie reveals herself and chases Peter back upstairs into the still open attic. Peter's reaction is so goddamn believable. He is still the quintessential teenager, still just a child in a young man's body, scared but wanting his mother to love him. Slowly, Peter begins to take in his surroundings. A dark attic barely lit by a few candles. He finds the spot where his grandmother's corpse once lay. And then an odd, wet scratching sound. Remember the crash from earlier? Well, the sound of the piano strings scraping against viscera and bone and the spurting blood are deeply, deeply disturbing, especially as she is staring at him wide-eyed the entire time. He looks down only to find more of the naked cultists staring at him as well. What the fuck? At the end of his proverbial rope, Peter jumps through the window. As he lay there in the garden, we hear Annie's head finally thump against the attic floor. As soon as it does, the 3 sacrifices, the 3 heads required, have been given to Paimon. The ritual is complete. We see his telltale glint absorbed into Peter's body. He slowly stands, now completely possessed by the demon. Annie's headless corpse floats by some unseen power out of the attic, across the yard, and up into the treehouse. Peter/Paimon follows her slowly, seeing more of the naked cultists watching him, smiling. Among them, we see what looks like the dog that caused Peter to swerve and kill Charlie, setting the plot into motion and implying that the cult was somehow behind that too. Finally, Peter enters the treehouse, seeing his mother and grandmother's corpses prostrated in front of a statue of Paimon made with the head of Charlie. Joan is there too. And as the movie closes out, she and the cultists rejoice in their success in bringing the demon to Earth. The music turns into this oddly liturgical, reverent piece, leaving behind the more traditional, dissonant droning of horror music in favor of a consonant section of horns and chimes to signal a celebration. This is as good a time as any to mention the fantastic music and sound design of the movie. Good sound. The very last shot of the film is one that shows the entire inside of the treehouse as the cultists cheer for the coming of their lord, filmed from a distance, outside the fourth wall, like looking at a diorama. It is a very strange perspective, but makes sense with our established context. The movie ends how it began, coming full circle. We are again seeing these events happening to these small people, being once again moved around like toys in a miniature. It wasn't just the family being manipulated by the cult. The cult was also being manipulated by Paimon himself. While Hereditary may not be a traditional horror film, it is easily one of the most terrifying, unsettling movies I have ever seen. Everybody here is bringing their A-game. From the writing, to the directing, to the cinematography, the editing, the acting, and on and on and on. Ari Aster doesn't use cheap jump scares. Instead, he is a master of building up tension of a scene higher and higher in natural ways until something snaps, both in the movie and in us. The performances of Toni Collette, Alex Wolff, and Gabriel Brin I have already discussed. But even Millie Shapiro, the actress who plays Charlie, a young 13-year-old girl with barely any lines, managed to create layers of meaning with her silent performance. The car accident scene in particular is one that will haunt me for a long time. And all that is just incredible, especially considering that this is the first film Ari ever made. I really hope that you took my advice at the beginning and watched the movie before the video, because, man, it is really something that needs to be experienced without any bias or pre-knowledge. Yet even watching it a second or third time didn't diminish its effect on me. So I hope you enjoyed this Halloween treat. Once again, I'd like to thank my wonderful patrons for making videos like these possible, including my newest patrons, Horchat Thought, Nikki Adem, Linz, and Chicken Pie. Thank you so much, guys. You rock. If you'd like to join them and help me make more videos like these, you can do so in the link in the description or at the end of the video. When you join, you get a bunch of different goodies, like getting to read the scripts early access to the videos, exclusive streams, and many other things like that. Either way, thank you very much for watching. I am still doing the before oral video, but I'm trying to get a little surprise for you guys. No promises yet, but yeah. Either way, the next time I see you will be with that video. Until next time.